A lot to get to in the news. President Trump has unveiled a new 20-point peace plan for Gaza after his White House meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. The proposal calls for an immediate ceasefire, the return of all hostages within 72 hours, and a phased Israeli withdrawal. Hamas members who lay down their arms would be granted amnesty or safe passage. A new board of peace led by Trump and including former British Prime Minister Tony Blair would oversee Gaza's transition, backed by an international force to provide security. Trump says most parties have agreed, but warned that if Hamas rejects the deal, Israel would have full U.S. support to continue its military campaign.
But I hope that we're going to have a deal for peace. And if Hamas rejects the deal, which is always possible, they're the only one left. Everyone else has accepted it. But I have a feeling that we're going to have a positive answer. But if not, as you know, Bibi, you'd have our full backing to do what you would have to do. Everyone understands that the ultimate result must be the elimination of any danger posed in the region, and the danger is caused by Hamas.
So, David, this isn't really so much of a negotiation as a surrender by Hamas. And if you're Hamas and can get out alive, well, that may not be such a bad deal at this point of the war either. Tell me your thoughts on this deal, your thoughts on European and Arab countries lining up behind it, saying that Hamas should say yes.
So, Joe, first, this is basically a surrender deal. I watched one of those go down in Beirut after the 1982 Israeli invasion, and Yasser Arafat, then the head of the PLO, was told, get out of Beirut and you can have amnesty, and he did. And he went on to fight other battles, but from an exile location. That may happen here. I think the pressure on Hamas from Palestinians to accept the deal and see an end to this war is going to be considerable. What I found striking about the presentation yesterday by President Trump was that this is a detailed plan at last for the day after the war ends. For more than a year, we've been talking here on the show about the absence of day after planning, of planning for a transition when the guns finally fall silent. It's finally here on paper, and it's a fairly well-fashioned plan. There's a board of peace, a kind of showy-sounding body that will be headed by President Trump, but will probably really be run by Tony Blair, the former British Prime Minister. But under that, there'll be a group of Palestinian technocrats. I'm told that the names of most of those people have already been selected and vetted. There'll be an international stabilization force to help create a new Palestinian police that can create security so people aren't killing themselves chasing after food. And the countries that will be involved in that have also already been selected. Italy, Indonesia, Azerbaijan are among the countries that will be involved. There's a transitional process to reform the Palestinian Authority, which has responsibility for the West Bank but doesn't exercise it very much or very well. And it's hard to know how that will work out. But in theory, if the PA reforms, it will move into the process of governance in Gaza eventually. A final point about this is that when you read the fine text, you can see that Israel is not committing to fully withdraw militarily from Gaza for any foreseeable future. There will be a buffer zone around Gaza that will have Israeli military forces that can go back in when they feel it's necessary. But finally, Trump's ability to get everybody except Hamas on the same page, Israel, all the key Arab countries, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Egypt, Jordan, Qatar, together supporting this plan, and to back off his earlier demand that all Palestinians have to leave Gaza. That's a significant move, and as I wrote this morning, if this goes through, it is a foundation for the broader Arab-Israeli peace that the whole world would like to see.
And just for domestic audiences here in America, Willie, obviously Donald Trump is a divisive figure. He's probably, depending on what poll you read, he's got approval rating anywhere from 39% to 45, maybe 46%, but very divisive. The one thing that's important for people that are watching this and saying, well, what, Donald Trump, the head of any board or whatever, is to understand is, and David's reporting is the same, I'm sure Caddy's is the same, Arab leaders like dealing with Donald Trump. They say he understands us, we understand him, and they're ready for this to come to an end. So if somebody's out there sitting going, oh, wait, this guy is saying, I alone can bring peace to the region. Usually when he says I alone, just cut it off, don't listen, because what he's going to say after that is probably not going to be completely accurate. In this case, it's other than Hamas, he is the one person that the Arab countries are willing to get behind and do things with.
And his son-in-law, Jared Kushner, who has been involved in these negotiations as well. They trust him and have a great relationship with Jared as well.
Yes,
and he's
they
been
do.
At the center of this. So, Caddy K, you look at the conditions listed in this 20-point plan. It's got a lot, as someone told me last night, a lot to like in there. It depends on Hamas now, which has not obviously been a rational actor in negotiations. They're a terrorist group agreeing to it. They say they want a ceasefire. They say they want Israeli troops to withdraw in exchange for hostages. Well, here it is, albeit a phased withdrawal, as David said, of Israeli troops. Is there any expectation from this collection of nations, this collection of bodies that have gotten behind this, that Hamas actually will sit at the table this time and listen?
And there's a couple of things, Willie. There's some specifics on the number of Palestinians who are serving life sentences in Israeli prisons who are to be released, 250. That number doesn't seem to have been taken from random. So that makes you think, have there been, back-channel negotiations around this that actually have got some kind of sign-off preemptively from Hamas? The fact that Hamas leaders could be allowed to leave could also give some of them pause for thinking that this is worth doing. But there are still questions about this deal, right? I mean, the main one is, what does the president mean and what does Netanyahu mean when they say that if Hamas does not sign on to this, then Israel can do what it needs to do the maximum, go as far as it needs to go with American backing for that position. And it's not clear exactly what that would mean in the long run for Israel. Does that inevitably lead to some kind of permanent occupation of the Gaza Strip? And how would Israel carry it out? I think the timing of this is so interesting in the context of the polls that are coming out, showing how much support Israel as a country and the Israeli government is losing amongst Americans, particularly amongst young Americans. There is very little patience now for Israel in this country, which is why this kind of a deal needs to be done sooner rather than later for Bibi Netanyahu in order to have American support, because it's cratering. It was actually declining before the attacks of October the 7th, but since October the 7th, and the new polling this week shows that it really has cratered, particularly amongst young Americans.
And let me say this slowly for people that didn't hear it the first 100 times I said this. Benjamin Netanyahu and his insistence on continuing this war after his military leaders and his intel leaders said there was no need to continue this war, along with the horrific scenes that we have seen coming out of Gaza, coming out of the area, post-October the 7th, has 2 years after that, has really driven a wedge in support for Israel in America. Now listen, as a lifetime supporter of Israel, I understand most of the world's always seemed to be lined up against Israel, especially in the United Nations. But people who support Israel's long-term health and viability need to pay closer attention to these polls, because the polls that Caddy just mentioned, Mika, they're extraordinarily bad for Israel. And that does matter. It matters for support because Israel gets most of its support from the United States.